Good day and welcome to today's virtual seminar, Cross-Border Data Flows, Enabling Local Economies and Driving E-Commerce. On behalf of the Global Data Alliance, we would like to thank the co-conveners of the JSI e-commerce negotiations for their gracious invitation to host today's event. And we would especially like to thank so many WTO delegations for their time and attendance today. My name is Joe Whitlock. I am a Director of Policy at BSA, which administers the Global Data Alliance. The Alliance is a cross-industry coalition of companies that are committed to high standards of data responsibility and that rely on the cross-border transfer of data to create jobs all around the world. The Alliance consists of companies that are in every sector of the economy and that operate in every corner of the globe. The issues of data flows and data localization are critically important. In sectors ranging from agriculture to manufacturing, cross-border data transfers grow local economies, enabling citizens and enterprises alike to access foreign markets, create local jobs, and enhance productivity, safety, and environmental responsibility. We look forward to examples of these points from our speakers today. Before introducing the speakers, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's event is being recorded. We will follow a directed question and answer format, and we will attempt to address any questions received in advance of today's event. We would welcome any additional questions that you may have. Please provide them through the chat feature in Teams, or you can send them to us after the fact via contact information on our website. That website address, which you have on the invitation, is globaldataalliance.org. Now I'd like to turn to the discussion. We're honored to welcome three guest speakers today. They are Kevin Rogers. Kevin is the head of mobile services at Panasonic. Secondly, Shola Sani. Shola Sani is public policy director for Sub-Saharan Africa at Mastercard. And Rimini Makama. Rimini is Microsoft's Government Affairs Director for Middle East and Africa Emerging Markets. I will now turn over the discussion to my colleague, Isabel Rochia, from BSA's Brussels office. Isabel?
Thank you, Joe, and welcome everyone to this event. I'm Isabel Rocha indeed, and I will be moderating today's discussion. So I hope with these seminars to provide information and perspective on cross-border data flows across different industry sectors. Cross-border data flows enable a number of companies to operate, to grow, to innovate, to service their customers around the globe. And so hopefully the discussion today will provide some of examples from our speakers on how they leverage the movement of data in their respective fields. As Joe mentioned, we have a Q&A box available to you on the platform, so feel free to make use of that. That will certainly help us guide the discussion in a way that's most useful to you all in the attendance. So with that, let me turn over to Kevin Rogers to kick off the discussion. Kevin, thank you very much for being with us today. So as Joe mentioned, you work in the avionics business. So avionics is anything from communication, navigation systems, entertainment systems onboard airplanes. And so when we think about airplanes, data flows is not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. So perhaps you can start by telling us a little bit about the avionics business, what it is, and then if you can perhaps elaborate a little bit more on why are data flows important for your industry sectors. How is the movement of data enabling a company like Panasonic to transform and support your business operations? So Kevin, thank you again for joining us. And with that, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. And it's a great pleasure to be given this opportunity to speak at this event. So Panasonic Corporation, just as a brief bit of background, was founded over 100 years ago in Osaka, Japan, and now employs over 270,000 people worldwide, of which over 4,000 are employed globally by Panasonic Avionics. Now, we are the world's largest provider of in-flight entertainment systems, Isabel, which you've subtly mentioned already, and many of you will have probably enjoyed watching content, playing games on some of the world's leading airlines, whatever class of travel you're flying in. Now, in addition, we're also a leading global provider of in-flight connectivity, and what that means is you can get on many of these aircraft and use both Wi-Fi or even use your own mobile phones. Now, in-flight connectivity is becoming ubiquitous, and the need will likely become ever more important as we start traveling again in this post-COVID world. Certainly, what we see in consumer sentiment is that people want to stay connected all of the time, even more so now than they did before, of course. So the business is truly global. It provides local employment in many of the countries attending this meeting. We need to provide immediate and accurate support, logistics and maintenance to local airlines, as well as operating a global communications network for the in-flight connectivity. Panasonic, by providing cost-effective connectivity in an environment of straightforward international data flows, would lower the bar for your local airlines, for example, to innovate and to provide the services necessary to compete in this global environment. Cross-border data flows are essential to the effective and viable operation of this business. The business is central to transporting people, transporting goods, and managing airline operations. The global reach of our employees contributes to your local economies, of course. And I think, just to put that in context, if you think about the global flow here, it is truly global. So you're in an aircraft, you're browsing the internet at 30,000 feet, the plane is traveling at 500 miles per hour, and that's crossing many countries. That is truly a cross-border flow of data. And I think just finally, in this digital age, small businesses have become what we would call accidental exporters. A web page, for example, can be accessed almost from anywhere, anytime the world over. And Panasonic enables that reach from anywhere in the world. I'll just leave it at that, Isabel, and just hand it back to you in a second. I just think that hopefully that provides some insight as to how our business is affected by data flows and how we impact the local economies around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, absolutely. That's a good way to set this scene. And you mentioned logistics, transport aspect of this line of business. So maybe we can come back to that later on in the discussion. But for now, let me move to our second speaker, Shola Sani. Shola, thank you very much for being with us today as well. So Shola, you work with Mastercard and you lead policy work in East and West Africa. So Mastercard, as we know, is a sort of large payment processing company, among others. You work with consumers, companies, financial institutions across the board. And so the financial sector, interestingly, was one of the early adopters of digital technology. And so many of these technologies, in fact, rely on the ability to move data across border, whether it is to process payments, to guarantee the security of those payments, to fight fraud. So there's a number of different applications for which the movement of data, I imagine, it is pretty crucial. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more how Mastercard uses this movement of data across border to really service the customers, and maybe framing the question as a negative. If you did not have this ability to move data across borders, how would that impact your work in the financial sector? Would that create some difficulties? And maybe you have some examples that you can share with us to sort of illustrate that. So Shola, thank you for joining us again, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Isabel. It's really a great opportunity to have the chance to explain a bit of what Mastercard does. Traditionally, we're regarded as a cards company, and some other people think that maybe we might be a bank. But the reality is that we're not a bank and we're not a card company, but rather we're the technology that powers the platform on which banks and other financial institutions are able to enable commerce across the world. So I'm talking about everything from shopping to traveling to being able to make payments for stuff that you buy online. We are the technology partner that banks in about 210 different countries use to enable and service their customers. Now, these banks, 22,000 different financial institutions all over the world, between them issue in the range of 2.4 billion cards to everyday card users like you and me. And this is your MasterCard that you have in your wallet and that you swipe when you go about your daily business. Now, how is data flows critical to our business? When you have 22,000 financial institutions connected to a network. You have 2.4 billion users of card technology. You have the sheer magnitude of 100 billion transactions that we process that pass through our systems on an annual basis. Then it's obvious that you have to ensure that the safety and security of that ecosystem is solid and credible, and enables both the cardholders and financial institutions build the trust and have confidence that their funds will travel across this network from one endpoint to the other without falling into fraud, without falling victim to fraud. Secondly, these transactions need to be able to happen almost instantaneously to meet the urgency of the need at the point of payment when a card user swipes a card, for instance. And I'll give you another example. If you might be familiar with the London transport network, and if the passengers using the tube, the underground, and buses had to wait interminably or indefinitely at points of entry and exit, then it defeats the purpose of commute time and all of that. Now, Mastercard technology is what enables the Transfer for London system work in the tap and go model that's currently preferred by a lot of Londoners. So instead of exchanging cash or whatever at the point of taking transport, consumers are actually able to tap and go using their technology. This is why it's fundamental that, one, the entire ecosystem around payments is safe and secure, and then two, it's important that these transactions are able to happen instantaneously. Data flows across borders come into play in the sense that we rely on rich global data sets to effectively operate. I did mention that we're present in 210 different countries and territories. And what this means is that to enable our fraud detection and fraud prevention solutions, we have to build these capabilities on models that use historical aggregated payments transaction information and multi-country data sets drawn from all over across our network, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to address the key areas of need and ensure that the network across all of the markets where we're present is secure and credible. So what we're doing is applying data science, machine learning, and all of that to the various sets of data generated across our network. And we're able to use those learnings to deploy security measures across 210 different countries at exactly the same time. And then also having a view of cross-border data enables us to predict fraud trends and make sure that we apply things in Nigeria, for instance, where I'm based, based on learnings that we got from maybe Brazil, and protect card users as well as financial institutions here. On the second point, I had mentioned before that transactions need to be completed at the moment, and the latency reduction, system resilience, and access to the different transaction data sets from different international institutions with whom we're connected enables these transactions to happen almost in real time. So imagine if I, as a Mastercard holder in Nigeria, for instance, make a payment online, maybe I buy something on Amazon, the payment goes through successfully almost in real time because data is able to flow between my country, Nigeria, and the country where the merchant I'm patronizing is domiciled. So to conclude, I would say that it's very important that the administrations on the line today realize that if the free flow of data across borders is impeded, it seriously affects our business as a payments enabler. And governments also need to understand that data flows across borders is not a one-way street. If there are impediments on what's allowed to leave a country, then these obstacles will most likely affect what's able to come in as well. And because the security of the payments ecosystem is only as strong as its weakest link, it's encouraged that instead of isolating one's economy through putting up restrictions on cross-border data flows, it's actually more beneficial from a security point of view and from a payments enabling point of view to create digital ecosystems that are more open and permit the transmission of very critical payments data across borders. So to answer your question in one sentence, Isabel, if we couldn't access cross-border data flows, then our business will fall flat and 2.4 billion cards around the world would basically not work outside of of their countries.
Well, Shola, that's quite a compelling argument that you just gave us. I hope so. Thank you very much for this. And you mentioned ecosystem and sort of trend prediction as well in your remarks. So maybe we can put a pin in that and come back to that at a later stage in the conversation. But for now, let me turn to Rimini Makama, who's our third speaker. Rimini, thank you as well for being on the panel today. So Rimini, you work with Microsoft. You're also in a public policy position, working on sub-Saharan Africa. Your company, Microsoft, is quite a well-known company. A lot of its software and technology is known to many. What's perhaps less known is the work that you do with businesses and with governments. And so one of your main focus, as I understand, is around cloud computing. And so maybe you could start by giving us a quick explanation of the link between cloud computing technology and data flows and what it enables you to do to sort of serve the companies and the businesses that you support, and maybe also in a similar vein, as you are sort of enabler to others. Can you tell us a little bit from your perspective, what are the elements that are really important in this relationship that you have as a service provider, as an enabler, vis-a-vis your customers, be they businesses, companies, or government organizations? So Rimini, again, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. Good afternoon from Lagos. Thank you for having me. So let's start with the basics. Microsoft is a cloud company, but what is the cloud? The cloud is simply taking all the technology you have on your computer and letting someone else take care of it for you. So the easiest way to think about this is think about renting all your resources, your servers, your hard drive, your networking gear from a company like Microsoft, right? So you don't have to worry about dealing with any of the hardware or any of the software that runs on it. You can just go about your job and just do your business. When files are stored on the cloud, you can access them from anywhere. So unlike back in the day where you needed to move about with a hard drive, or you physically always had to have your own computer, you can now access everything from where you are, from your laptops, from your phones, from your tablets, because the storage is all online. That software is called, that sort of software is called software as a service, which is the official name of the software which you can access from the cloud. Using the cloud is very reliant on cross-border data flows because data needs to be able to move from one country to another, from different borders. This is because often our servers, which are in the cloud, are in jurisdictions across the world. The internet thrives when data is able to move freely, and there needs to be data flow seamlessly between nations. I think the next question was, what is the most important element in when we deal with our customers? The most important element, I would say, is trust. People will not use technology that they do not trust. So we must be trusted by our customers. We must be trusted by our partners, governments, and institutions who we work with globally. At Microsoft, we made privacy, compliance, security, and transparency our top priorities. We want our customers to trust our holistic approach to security. We spend over $1 billion annually on security research and development. Our CEO often says that we are the biggest security company that you do not know about. We want our customers and our partners across the world to trust our leadership in compliance. And we want them to trust our commitment to privacy and security. Over to you, Sibyl.
Thank you, Rimini. Maybe I can ask a follow-up question to what you were explaining, and maybe digging a little bit deeper into some of the benefits that come from this sort of a little bit abstract concept of data flows for the users. And let me rephrase that. I mean, in any given country, the MSMEs, micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, usually represent the vast majority of the economic tissue of the country. It's on average of 80–85% perhaps, and in some countries it can be up to 90–95% of companies that are really small and microstructures. Can you maybe explain a little bit more in details of what are the benefits concretely for MSMEs coming from being able to move data around? We're talking about companies that may not have the same capacity as some of the larger organizations. So understanding better the concrete link between data flows enablement and the use of those technologies and concrete benefits for companies. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Will do, and I'll also give you a couple of examples. I think the most immediate benefit for an MSME is it helps access new markets. It lowers barriers to innovation and allows you to just reach newer markets. So think of it this way. You can just go on your phone and access a vendor in a different part of the world and buy something and have it delivered to your doorstep. It also improves competitiveness for small businesses, which now allows them to be able to compete with bigger organizations, which traditionally was not the case because they have access to technology. One of the areas of Microsoft's research focus is agriculture. And we have a product or a project in Africa, which we call FarmBeats, which Microsoft researchers have taken data-driven agriculture to do precision farming. So the process means that we use broadband connectivity through TV white spaces. TV white spaces is the unused spectrum on your television, and you connect them through IoT to be able to measure yield and crop to help improve and lower costs for farmers. It's a bit of a more technical process, but it's only because data is available that we're able to do that, and data is being able to move from one jurisdiction to another. Another good example is a project that we have in Kenya, which is called the REACH initiative with water. So it's more social enterprise based, but still a good example for how data flow works to improve the lives of people. Traditionally in rural areas, water is pretty difficult, and one way to access it is through boreholes. That's what we call them in Nigeria. In other parts of the world, I think you probably refer to them as pump water. Now, sensors are put in the handle of the pump, which is then connected to the cloud. And from the sensors, you can tell how much water is available within the well, which the water is being pumped from. So that way, you can tell whether a region has enough natural water to be able to provide for a village or whether new ones need to be built. So that's one way which cross-border data flow directly impacts citizens' lives as well.
Thank you, Rimini. That's interesting examples you're giving us. Maybe I'm going to circle back to Kevin now with another question to you, Kevin. You mentioned in your introductory remarks transport and logistics aspect of your business. I wanted to maybe pivot a little bit to expand on the supply chain element that you alluded to. So the avionics business, as you mentioned, implies a lot of different players, and they're coming from a lot of different markets and a lot of different countries, presumably also players from different size, different sectors. So just curious to hear a little bit more from you on sort of how do data flows fit into the supply chain picture? Is this ability to move data, is that helping in any way its supply chain management? Is it helping it to be more efficient, to be more cost effective? If you can maybe give us a little bit of a feeling for that. And I hope we can see you now. I think we should be able to. So Kevin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm not sure whether seeing me is a good thing or bad thing, but I think you can see me now. Thank you. But that's an important question. I'll keep the response fairly brief. I think it should be quite clear, I hope. I mean, we provide connectivity to airlines and their passengers flying globally at altitude, of course, and we must also we have to operate a global network to provide that service. But in addition, we've also got to operate a global data network that manages the logistics associated with our global presence. You know, as I said before, we have maintenance facilities and offices literally all around the world in many of the countries that are represented here. So, for example, a plane might fly from, let's say, London to Nairobi. We might have to perform some maintenance on landing, provide a spare seat back screen, for example, and we must do that all before it takes off again. So there's a very small window to have those supplies in place and to get people onto the aircraft and communicate with the airline, and so on. There's more examples there. We also have aircraft data that's uploaded to global data centers to address aircraft performance. We need to update, upload and download media content. And all of that is enabled by efficient and effective cross-border data flows. And most of that data, of course, goes back into the cloud, which is represented elsewhere on this call today. And I think just finally, we also work with many smaller businesses around the world to source components, many small components, large components that go into the aircraft. We've got to source media content from anywhere in the world to get it to anywhere in the world. And we've got to provide the airline with important information about their aircraft in a very timely fashion. So in a quick snapshot, Isabel, those are some of the key examples of how cross-border data flows impact the logistics aspects of our business. And I hope that provides some insight for you and the rest of the audience.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting how sort of, speed and security is becoming a bit of a theme in some of your remarks, you and Shola and Rimini as well. I'd like to maybe pivot the discussion slightly now to bring it more into current times, so to speak, and talk about COVID-19. And maybe, Shola, that's a question I will direct to you, if that's okay. So obviously, COVID-19 is still very much present in everybody's mind at the moment. Many countries are still fighting the effect of the pandemic, and many are also looking at ways to get through recovery, whether it's the economic recovery, whether it's the recovery of health systems, and many other aspects of a nation's life. And the WTO recently highlighted the importance that internet and e-commerce has played in mitigating some of the impact of the pandemic, but also we're starting to see how those can also play a role in the recovery. So bringing this to you, Shola, maybe with a more of a sort of financial angle, obviously access to financial services is part of the recovery discussion, but broadening it up to recovery, broadly speaking, do you make a link between data flows and COVID-19 recovery programs? And you did mention earlier in your remarks trend prediction, for example. Is that something that you find has relevance in today's discussions about data flows? If you can shed some lights on that, and if you do have some case studies or examples that you can bring as well to us, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel, for that question. I think we all agree that at this point in time, governments are focusing as part of their recovery strategy on getting small businesses back up on their feet. In SSA, the region where I work, for instance, small businesses make up something like 70% of an average economy. Now, there's a lot of work that we're doing with government in these areas to enable small businesses, but today I'd like to talk about an initiative, an innovation that we created that's called the Mastercard Farmers Network. Now, you might wonder, what does agriculture or what do farmers have to do with payments? What we've been able to find is that because we have this globe spanning technology platform that supports payments, it actually creates a lot of other endpoints across ecosystems where value is able to be delivered to different sectors outside or beyond the remit of payments alone. So while financial access is a great thing that we support, we've also been able to sort of diversify and enable other sectors, everything from agriculture to health and education. But Mastercard Farmers Network is particularly an important one for us because it's a digital marketplace that we have created riding upon our digital payments infrastructure. And what the marketplace does is that it brings together buyers who are looking to buy good quality produce at favorable market prices and connects them digitally, of course, with smallholder farmers who are looking for more reliable markets and fair prices. There's another dimension to the marketplace that we created because it's able to give these farmers the digital tools that they need to build their know-how, predict what weather patterns, for instance, will be like in the context of their farming activity. And then beyond that, there's also an opportunity created for financial institutions to look at all of the activity that's taking place in the marketplace and use this data to make judgments around designing financial products and making other services and solutions available for the benefits of these players. Now, the context, to give a bit more context on this initiative, as at this quarter, Mastercard has 460,000 registered farmers using this platform. Beyond the farmers, there are 80 different buyer organizations, and these range from small size to the larger enterprises, as well as 43 financial institutions. Data flows coming in this scenario because this was an initiative that was created in our Mastercard Labs, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya, focused on financial inclusion. But this 460,000 registered farmers span 4 different countries, Tanzania, Uganda, and even as far as India. They're able to derive better income, they're able to broaden their markets, they're able to find expend less effort in finding the outlets for their hard work. But all of this is dependent on the fact that data can flow across geographical boundaries between Kenya, where the initiative was birthed, and other parts of Mastercard's global payments network, which generates the data that feeds into the rails, if I can put it that way, that this agriculture-based initiative leverages. So if policy, for instance, in any of the participating jurisdictions or any new jurisdictions that come on board, because we're planning to expand this initiative, if policy comes in and truncates the ease of movement of that network level data, that global level data that we see, and prevents this data from flowing between farmers and users of that agricultural marketplace in one jurisdiction into another, what it means is that it has far-reaching consequences for these farmers. There's loss of their markets, there's loss of income, there's potentially loss of employment, because as we know in this region, agriculture is actually the #1 employer of labor, and it provides the mainstay for many of our economies. So this is one area where Mastercard continues to rely on cross-border data flows to support government's agenda to get economies back on track by helping small businesses grow, and by continuing to support tried and tested sectors like agriculture to continue to help the socioeconomic recovery of citizens and small businesses. I know it's a bit of a roundabout way, but I hope that answers your question, Isabel.
Thank you, Shola. No, absolutely, and I guess it sort of builds a little bit on your point that you made earlier as well. And data flows is not a one-way street; it goes in a multi-directional fashion, and so it can truly serve a number of different sectors and players within an ecosystem. Being conscious of time, I'd like to maybe ask to link to the audience in particular that we have today. As we know, the WTO is convening a joint statement initiative to discuss e-commerce and potentially coming up with new rules and evaluating different policy options at the moment. And so you all three have spoken to some of the concrete benefits that come from the movement of data, some of the potential inhibition that and the consequences that those could get on a number of different aspects. I'd like to maybe ask you to, in 2-3 points that you would like to the audience to take away from today's discussion. Again, as many of the people in attendance here are thinking about the policy options right now. Maybe Shola, since you're on, perhaps you'd like to go first and give some of those pointers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, the one thing we'd love the administrations on this call today to bear in mind is that we do understand and we appreciate the very valid concerns that are driving some of the policy restrictions that governments consider around data flows and cross-border movements of data. We know that there are lots of drivers around cybersecurity, privacy concerns, even national security, and sometimes a desire to stimulate domestic industry growth. And Mastercard does not belittle or overlook these value considerations. I think our message is more that there are many, many ways to work together, both in deploying technology and services in well-reasoned and responsible manners to cater to those concerns, and also to look at the sort of more win-win policy frameworks that can address the concerns around data flows, as well as enable individual economies to get the best out of the possibilities that the digital economy presents to all of us by virtue of the fact that data flows are the lifeblood of economic development, economic recovery in these times. And yeah, I think that's our takeaway. Let's work together. There are ways in which we can achieve the common objectives without necessarily blocking data flows. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Shola. Let me ask the same question to the other speakers. Rimini, perhaps you would like to go next on the key takeaways that you'd like to leave the audience with today.
Yes, thank you, Isabel. I think that there's a unique opportunity. We live in an increasingly interconnected, and the ability to transfer digital information across borders is very crucial to the economic growth and opportunities that lay globally for the world. McKinsey Global Institute estimated in 2014 that the international flow of data contributed $2.8 trillion to the global economy, right? This figure is set to reach $11 trillion in 2025. So the cloud is going to create enormous opportunities to grow both large and small businesses, drive information and innovation and transformation of business operations. I think one of the things that I would like policymakers to bear in mind, particularly all those on the call now, is it's important for them when they're thinking about these policies to create those that will allow small businesses to thrive and also allow them to compete. Sometimes we create policies with big businesses in mind, and we don't realize that the same technology is being utilized by these smaller businesses. So that's very crucial for them to be able to compete. We need policies that allow them to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Rimini, for those words and very interesting comments from you. Thank you so much. Let me now turn to Kevin, perhaps for, again, the same question, but I would love to hear your take, Kevin, on some of the key takeaways you'd like to leave the audience with. Please, the floor is yours, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Isabel. Thank you. And just also a thank you to the audience for taking the time to attend this, and to the fellow panelists, of course, for their insightful comments today. I think it's been very helpful for me as well. I think it's fairly straightforward in terms of the takeouts. I'd like everybody just to imagine data flows as another part of infrastructure. The better the road and highways, the safer and easier it is to travel, and we need that globally. And if we have differences in rules around the world, that can make that travel unnecessarily slow and complex, and that applies equally to data as well. In our business, in the aviation sector, we're breaking new ground and truly innovating in a market which obviously is very much on the ground at the moment, but will take off again. Please excuse the pun. What we need is predictable, uniform, and easy to implement regulation. If we get that globally, that's going to provide a win-win scenario situation for us all. It's going to provide local employment, it's going to satisfy passengers, it's going to create airline satisfaction, and it's also going to provide growth for the global SMEs. Isabel, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, that was very eloquent, so thank you for those words. I think this is closing the discussion part of the session today, but don't log out just yet. We have a few more comments to offer you from my colleague Joe, but before I turn it over to Joe, I just wanted to thank you, Shola, Rimini, Kevin, for joining us, and a big thank you to all of you who are following this virtual seminar from your home or wherever you are today. Thank you so much, and let me turn it over to Joe for some concluding remarks.
Great. Thank you so much, Isabel, and thank you, Kevin, Rimini, and Shola, for the fascinating discussion and very quickly paced discussion, I must say. There are a couple of points as I've been listening here that I thought it might be useful to recap. One is Kevin's comments on the importance of certainty and predictability, the importance of uniformity or interoperability. I think those are excellent points. The second, more from a technology perspective, just the really compelling stories we heard today of the importance of real-time connectivity across the globe at all latitudes, at all longitudes, and at all altitudes. And that means connectivity across networks and via sensors, whether those sensors are in an aircraft or whether they are in an artesian well. I also thought comments today on the importance of the ability to instantaneously validate and verify and analyze transactions for security and privacy purposes. Those were very interesting stories as well. Shola's comments that the world really does have a global digital ecosystem, and that ecosystem is only as strong as its weakest link. I think that's a very compelling articulation of sort of the common aspect of our work here, and also that data flows are not a one-way street, and they really are a two-way street. Finally, Rimini's comments on the importance of trust. That is a theme that I know comes up in many of these discussions, but building trust into data flow discussions is important. Privacy, security, and transparency. And then finally, I think from an economic perspective, everyone's comments on the importance and the potential of data flows to lower barriers to market entry, technology barriers, infrastructure barriers, and the potential for data flows really to create markets in their own right, whether that be for SMEs or in the farming space, or more broadly. Absolutely a very, very interesting discussion. So again, a big thank you to Isabel and to all of our presenters today. The Global Data Alliance would absolutely welcome any additional comments that you might have. Please feel free to visit our website at globaldataalliance.org. That's globaldataalliance.org. You will find on the website a large number of reports and materials on this subject. The Global Data Alliance is focused exclusively and only on the issue of data localization and data transfer. So we hope there will be interesting information for you to review there. And again, thank you for your time today, and we wish you a pleasant remainder of your day. Thank you very much.